All right, we're back for our fourth episode of the series of myths, and today we're going to be talking about specifically the leader-curated environment. We've given so many, before we push record, we gave so many different titles to this, but with that, TJ, you teased it last time. Should I throw it to you? Should I throw it to Kim? Mitch? Who wants to kick us off?
I'll take it.
Let's do it. Come on, Mitch. Let's go.
Well, I know all learning environments are not, we ended on this a little bit last time, but I think it's worth saying, that when we consider leadership curated spaces or environments, my mind goes to the environment is larger than a single classroom. It's either a whole school campus or maybe even a district or a county superintendent, like seeing that as your environment and recognizing that we created learning environments because we didn't want to just leave it up to nature, that learning in nature is not kind, it's survival of the fittest. And there's this collective knowledge that the human species has, but it took many, 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 many generations to figure out, like, don't eat that plant, and we don't want to just subject kids to that kind of learning. So we create these artificial learning environments that we can curate and set up, design for learning and how we know the brain works and creating safety and all of that. So I think that's not just a classroom thing. That's also a school-wide thing. That's a district-wide thing. That's it can have a bigger vision. So I think leaning into the idea of artificial environments, not as a bad thing. We have to have them if we're going to create places of safety and learning. And I think it's really interesting when you consider that school-wide, because if you've ever visited a campus that you're not part of, the community, which all of us have, you can really pick up on that in either direction when you walk on campus. It's something you can just feel, it seems like. So there's the intro. Should I talk about the ant again? And the beach?
Well, I think the first thing is, as a school leader, as a district leader, we have to take responsibility for the environment and to understand that creating, curating, as Josh said, that environment is our role, and that the environment isn't simply natural. It's, like you said, it's something that we synthesize, something that we put together, something that we can feel. And as people who go to a lot of schools, we can feel that right away when we go into a school, when we go into a classroom. And when I was an assistant super and I traveled to all of the schools I supported, I could feel the differences in the environment, in the school culture. And one thing that I'll say, because I've done a good bit of research in marketing, and there's a concept of your first, second, third customer. Who's your first customer? Who's your second customer? And a lot of school leaders who I talk to in this environmental cultural piece will like to say that their customer is the student. And while I agree with that in theory, I don't know that I fully agree with it from a philosophical stance on leading a school. So I would typically coach a school leader to think of it this way. Your first customer is your teacher. So we're serving in an environment where our first customer is the teacher. We create that environment so that the teacher can be at their very best for the student. So it's not that the student is no longer the center or a customer. They're the second customer. And what I would say to my administrators who are listening is the student doesn't become the first customer until the teacher doesn't put the student as their first customer. When that happens, absolutely, you have to put the student body first. But when we're building that environment within our school, I will like to think of the teachers as the first customers of that environment so that they can be at their best. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense, Kim?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think so many times, I think I've talked about this before, and I definitely wrote about it in my book. Walking across the campus, like being an outsider and walking, that first feeling that you get when you're there, you can feel it easily. And it is either this, we're all united, right? You feel a sense of unity there, a sense of lightness there, or you do feel this heaviness. I would say
Mhm.
heavy walls, heavy walls. And I've definitely experienced both of those. And it's interesting because the environment that's been created, it oozes out into the adults and their
Mhm.
mindset and their actions and reactions towards one another, towards kids. Um, and it is just really interesting because that is all social and emotional. It is. And like we've said before, your learning environment, it is not neutral. It isn't. When you put people in there, right? All of a sudden, like there's no neutrality at all. You're all coming in with your baggage. You're all coming in with your stuff that you were thinking about that's now oozing out your pores and stuff like that. But I think, again, being very intentional of how you curate those environments, the visuals that you use, people from the outside, and especially the teachers and the students, they can feel that feeling, that sense of unity, that sense of belonging, that sense of peace and calm. You create that. You create that. The adults, right?
Mhm.
The leaders, but the adults, all of you together.
Can I throw a myth out there that I want to squash real quick?
Yeah.
Busted.
Mhm.
That the hallways, the cafeteria, the front office, all the other spaces outside of the classroom is purely the responsibility of the administration. And I would push back on that heavily,
For sure.
because typically what you're talking about, TJ, is like, I totally agree. As an administrator, I love the fact that, you're putting teachers first, because that is going to trickle down all the way down to the students and to the parents, to the community, and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But at the same point, I mean, you may only have one principal if you're in elementary, and that's it. That's your admin team.
Mhm.
For middle school, you may have one principal, one assistant principal. For high school, obviously it gets a little bit bigger because it's a bigger population. But to cover every square inch of that school, to make sure that it's safe and secure and that everyone's social emotional needs are being met, only on the sole person or sole couple people on that admin team, I think that's a unfair expectation. And I just think that it's not true to reality. It takes a whole village. And, the people that are in your classroom are the people that are in the cafeteria, they're in the hallways, in the bathrooms. It takes a whole team as one, right? That unity piece. And I think, to Kim's point of walking in and being able to feel those heavy walls, I think some of that comes with the idea of, this is my role, this is my responsibility, and it's only in these four walls.
Mhm.
And when we start looking at it on a grander scale and making sure that vision is communicated, the expectations communicated, and I'm even thinking about the PBIS system that we had in place and the common areas that were the first step of implementation, and how successful that was because we had everybody on board and started to see the changes, versus when that wasn't in place, it was essentially everyone for themselves.
Mhm.
One thing that we've talked about off the show, because Joe and I help school systems, whether it be a superintendent or school, create these teams that I'm about to mention, because I still think it's unfortunately rare to have a leadership team. You're talking about a distributed leadership model. And it's unfortunately what we find is there isn't a leadership team in a school. And then sometimes we find that there's a leadership team, but it's not very effective. It's not used well. And then sometimes we find there's a leadership team in name, but they don't have leadership development and they're not real leaders.
Mhm.
And then sometimes we find it's humming along with a really solid leadership team. The leaders get leadership development. They meet several times a month. They make decisions for the school and people take ownership. But if I'm listening to this right now and I'm a superintendent, for example, I want leadership teams in all of my schools. And I want plans from my school leaders on how they're going to build those and maintain them. If I'm a school leader listening right now, I want to surround myself with a group of key stakeholders from all the grade levels or all the departments, and I'm going to name leaders so that I also have some formal structures in place to create the environment that we're talking about, and some people who are named in that regard, not just it's everybody's responsibility, which I agree it should be, but there are some key people in some key positions that I would want to have. And again, I find it interesting that it's rare, and when it's in place, it's not always done well. And a technical tip there is leadership development for the teacher leaders on those teams, like not just content knowledge and pedagogy and better teaching, but actual leadership development. We say a third of the time you spend at the meeting should be spent on developing the leaders who are around the table. Otherwise, the other 2/3, it's basically wasted time, because if they can't lead the initiative when you leave the table, it's not worth having them at it.
Mm-hmm.
And the myth there, by the way, is that teachers, and Josh, you pointed at it, is that teachers aren't leaders, and that's just untrue.
It's very untrue. And I would even say, TJ, to what we did on our campus to kind of weed that out, right, of the folks that were at the table but didn't do anything once they left that meeting, was that we had a 3-year term essentially for everybody. So if you had to, every year, every leader had to again apply to become a leader for the next year. If they were provided that leadership opportunity, they could be there no longer than 3 years, because we didn't want folks that were there for 10, 15 years. Now they could do their 3-year term and then, jump out and then jump back in, if that was the best decision for that department or that grade level, or fill in the blank as the leadership position. But the idea is, for us, is we wanted people that were energized, passionate. We also wanted the entire campus to get experience in that leadership position, so they knew what was going on. Because what happened was, a lot of times we just had this title and we just had this assumption of what they did, but the folks didn't actually know what the position was. Well, if I can get everybody to actually do that position, now there's no assumptions. There's no negative feelings toward the person because, oh, I thought they were supposed to do X, Y, and Z. No, you were in that role. You knew exactly what was supposed to happen. Plus, now I've got this mindset of, I've got 100 leaders on my campus versus I have 10 leaders on my campus.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different mindset.
I was thinking it's so important for teachers to have the language, the words, you guys, the words, the language to use when you're in a position like that also, because there's so many times where, I will work with the mentors, right? Or the instructional coaches or the leaders, right? Across a campus or a school district, we'll put them all together and I'll give them the strategies and the systems and the routines and all the things they need to be doing in their classroom. And they're like, well, now how do I talk about it? Right? I can do it with my students, but now how am I leading? What does that look like and sound like? And it's different. It like you were saying, TJ, you got to be coached in that. You got to develop those skills. And even with my team of my mentor teachers that support me and schools and districts across the country, we just met last week and we went through that. We do that on the daily in Voxer, right? Like, how do you talk to teachers so that they feel empowered and equipped and then are able to spread the positivity, the goodness, the lightness, not the heavy? How do you do that? It's a skill that needs to be developed, is what I would say. And they need the language to develop that. And it does not come naturally. And if you are an administrator thinking that just because you've put together a group of people and that they've got this, they don't got this. They don't got this. You need to really give them the support so that they can go off and do what you're expecting them to do. It's the same thing with students. Teach social and emotional skills. Don't expect them. It's the same thing with teachers, right? You cannot just expect that they're going to be able to like take whatever you got and run with it and create this learning environment that you see in your head to bring your vision to life. Like, it doesn't work that way. Silence.
Well, the next question, though, I think I want to ask, because I think their listeners now probably on board with it, having the leadership team, but we just talked about developing the leaders on the leadership team. And I would just ask how, and I'll throw some tips out there. I think the audience would just ask how. One thing is book studies. is we typically will do a book study on pedagogy or professional learning communities or something like that. But I think picking a pure leadership book or a school leadership book to read with the team and to dissect, and people can take different chapters and different sections, to spend a third of the time talking about that. Another thing is scenarios. You can find leadership scenarios online, things that didn't go well, how can they handle it in the future? Another thing is observations. I think it's unfortunately still a novel idea, but if these department chairs are meant to run meetings, we should go watch them. We run the meeting. We watch teachers teach to give them feedback. Running a meeting is hard work. And so we need to help with the running of the meeting and the influence that they have in their department. So articles, book studies, scenarios, there's a lot that we can do at the meetings we have with our teacher leaders to develop them and to develop their skills.
I have a good one, a good myth that because you have a mission statement, or you and your leadership team have sat there and created a mission statement over the course of 45 minutes to an hour, that now all of a sudden everybody is on the same page and we all know what we're doing and off we go. Let me tell you, it pains me to say that happened to me. I found myself last year as an educational consultant sitting in a room with a group of 10 creating a mission statement, and the thought that was the best use of time, and then off we go to support our other teachers and all the students across our district. I wanted to rip out my hair. I mean, I was sweating. You know me. I get heated, and then instantly I was like, oh my God, I'm sweating in here. Sweating. Action. I think, TJ, what you're talking about is action. We're going to do a book study. It's action. We're going to do observation. It's action. Like I was saying, we're going to intentionally coach you, give your language, action. Yes, you need to know your why. Of course you do. But like, it doesn't take just that and then we're all good for the remaining of the school year. Like there's no action after that, you know?
Yeah, but leadership is typically a gatekeeper mentality. Like the people that make the mission statement are usually just a few folks. It's not open to the teachers. It's not open to bringing students in. It's not parents, community members. It's literally a couple people, and then they force it upon everybody else, and then it's just a king mentality. that's essentially what it is, and so that you're not going to get buy-in for that. Right. So that's why there's inaction versus action, because nobody feels like they have ownership of what has been created. It's just pushed on them, and so that's the whole concept that we were talking about before too, right? Of like bringing more folks to the table, is because so many people feel like they're on the outside looking in, and that's just a horrible feeling. Mitch, you were about to say something.
I'm just curious. I had an interesting interaction yesterday with a person. I was doing some work. It's kind of a loud environment, and after she and her friend were leaving, she was kind of like, "Sorry, are you trying to get work done?" I was like, "No, I actually like the chaos and the noise. I can tune it all out and focus on what I was trying to do." And she's like, "What are you working on?" So we start talking shop, and she's like, "You're in education." She came over and sat next to me. This she was retired. She's like, "For 30 years, I was a school secretary in a district that you're familiar with, Kim." But it makes me wonder, as you know, that the school secretary or the office staff, the bus driver, maintenance or custodial staff and custodial staff are sometimes and oftentimes the first face of the school culture for kids and parents and teachers that interface with. And in my mind, if someone is strategically or deliberately curating the culture of their environment at their school, then they would have very deliberate conversations with those people. First, making sure those people recognize the value and the role they play and feel that value, so that when you are coaching them, if you will, do certain things because of the role you play, they're more willing to do it, and they love doing it because they know their value and their worth. But you walk into a elementary school, and the way, like, one of the things that the pulse I get on the school culture is if that person's smiling or not. And it goes both ways. Now, that's not fair because maybe they're having a bad day. Everybody has a bad day. So I don't want this to sound judgmental, but I have been to schools repeatedly, and every time you walk in that front office, you're like, nobody looks happy in here. And that, I think, is a litmus test to culture. Maybe it could be other things, but like, what's going on here? Like, this is not a place of joy. I don't sense that when I walk in. And that's a heavy, like, responsibility for those people too. But I think recognizing that responsibility is really important. And I think people want to step into that responsibility if they feel poured into and valued, which is all leadership. I just want to hear what you guys think about that.
I couldn't agree more. And I would go as far as saying, like, equally as important as the principal and the principal's role. Unfortunately, a lot of those departments are siloed. Like, sometimes the secretaries are supervised by somebody else, and the custodians supervised by somebody else, and the buses and the kitchen manager. But I would say any principal listening should take all of that on. If I'm going to run this school, I'm going to run everything about it. And you may be supervised by somebody else. Like, I even talked to a district leader last week who supervises the math teachers in the classroom, and the principals don't. And the principals don't seem to take full ownership. I think that's a messy model. If I'm the principal or assistant principal, I'm taking full ownership of every facet. Even, like, I was going to bring up cleanliness too, where like
you.
But I think the school should be clean. It should smell clean. It should look clean. And the custodians are obviously a major part of that, but they should see that as a leadership role. Like, I made sure that my custodians knew how important they were. And I met with them. Bus drivers, when I was an assistant principal, I met with all the bus drivers. I'll never forget one of my first weeks as an assistant principal, and I went on a bus, and the bus driver said, "Who are you?"
Yep.
And I was like, "Who am I? I'm an assistant principal at this school." And I would regularly go on all the buses. They knew me, and then would bring them into the cafeteria for donuts a few times a year, and they knew who I was. They had access to me. And a lot of times after that, there are pros and cons. They would walk right into the school, into my office, and tell me a story about something that happened on the bus. But they weren't just calling dispatch anymore. It was we were a team. We got to transport these kids. That's not somebody else's responsibility. That's everybody's responsibility.
Well, and also, like, if we're doing something like a fun cart where we're providing drinks and snacks to everybody, well, are we just doing it for the teachers? Or is that going in the cafeteria? Is that going to the technology group? Is that going for the buses? All that kind of stuff. Christmas gifts, right? We do gifts like throughout the year for different folks. Well, are all those people also paraprofessionals? Our secretaries. There's so many people that are on staff that have touch points to our kids, but then get, like you said, TJ, they're siloed, right? Sometimes we just don't even think about them. They're out of mind, out of sight, but they have a huge impact on the lives of not only our campus and how it functions, but also they have direct relationships with our students too. I mean, to what Mitch was talking about, like, bus drivers, that's the entry point to your day for our kids, for a lot of our kids. And so, if that kicks off with a bad experience, well, we already know that it's probably going to be a really bad day for that kid throughout their day, and probably not a whole lot of learning is going to happen. So we want to make sure that we have happy and trained, like de-escalation strategies, what's going to happen, because essentially that's a moving classroom. That's what I used to tell my teachers. Everyone that's and my admin staff is like, they have the hardest job. The bus drivers have the hardest job on the campus. You have 70 kids on a bus, and they're going from point A to point B, and they're driving to keep everyone safe, but then also having to do classroom management on that same bus. Like, that's insanity. So I'm going to provide more respect and incentives for them and try and make their job as enjoyable as possible, because if they were to be gone, that obviously negatively impacts student learning also. So I think a lot of people get forgotten. And so as leaders, we need to make sure that they're involved with every aspect, including the wonderful things that we do for, gifts and, treats and all that other stuff too. They need to be a part of that.
And that's true of teachers listening, because if you happen to find yourself on a campus where maybe you're like, you don't love the culture, maybe leadership is not doing that, you can do that. You can be the person that walks over and a little gift or a little thank you, like just the recognition. Like we had this where I spent most of my career, there was the copy room, and it was this little tiny room with even a smaller little office off of it under a stairwell, but it was kind of like the hub of the school. And Lori ran the copy room. That was like what she did. And she could very easily just be forgotten about or, like taken for granted. But the culture of the school wasn't that. So she didn't feel that way. But it was like making a point to just stop by and little gifts and thank you. Like if this whole thing breaks down with 150 people on staff that need to go through here how many times a day, and so it's teachers can be a part of that. But I think that's the other question I wanted to ask you all is, when do you start to, as a leader or even a teacher, and there's a conscious effort to change culture, to move things in a different direction. What are the signs that that's starting to happen? Because I experienced that as a teacher. We were definitely like collectively a part of this change that we wanted to make. And a big part of that
Positive
was culture. Positive change. And we had, we had sayings we would do like, that's, we don't do that here. We don't talk that way here. We had, we were all in on this thing. But when do you start to see the change? If that makes any sense. Or can that even be answered?
I mean, I think it can be answered. One, I would measure it. Like you can get culture surveys. And we actually put a culture survey in one of our books. I think it's Building a Winning Team. And we built that based on Gallup research. And so you could measure it before and during, do a pre-post about things like, are we innovative? A series of questions there. Are we friendly to one another? A series of questions there. Does everybody care? Does everybody understand the vision? Like Kim said before about vision. So I would find survey, I would do a measurement of that. And one thing I did as a principal was I had an assessment. We actually had a team of people come in and assess the school. And it was an arduous process. And then they came back. So I had it done one time when I was an assistant principal, and then one time when I was a principal. Actually, one of the biggest compliments I had, to your point about signs, Mitch, was the Department of Education said, it feels cultish here. I took that as that was a badge of honor for me, because what happened was they, to your point about sayings, they interviewed all the teachers and they all said the same thing.
Yeah. The language.
The same language too. To Kim's point about words, like they were like, all the teachers said the same phrases.
Yep.
Like, yeah, that's what, have you ever been in a successful organization? You wouldn't run your business that way. Everybody doing their own thing, saying their own thing about the business.
Well, that's still like Kim's point. It shouldn't be a mission statement. It should be common language. That should build your quote unquote mission.
You know what I was thinking, you guys, as we were talking, like Mitch, you were saying that story about like when you walk in and you see the secretary, you want those families, you want the students, you want them to feel welcomed. And then TJ, you were talking about like, you want a sense of cleanliness. You want to notice this cleanliness, right? And what can we do to support all of that? And then we were also talking, Josh, you were talking about like feeling included and including everybody across that campus. And I immediately was like, you guys, this is be intentional so others notice. It literally is Bison. It's what do you want the people around you to experience, feel, notice? I want to notice that everyone feels welcome, included, supported. It feels clean. I want them to notice that. And so what do we as a team intentionally do and say so that the people do notice those things around us? And I was like, as we were talking, I was like, damn, talk about like uniting people and almost having it feel like cultish. I was like, the bison, man, it's a thing. It is a mad thing. I am 100% because when you can surround yourself with a mentality of it's not just me, right? It's us, it's all of us. That's pretty powerful when you can head into the hard things together, right? Because there will be hard things. Hello, did we ever even think that COVID was gonna like come about and like hit us in the head? Like, no, we had no idea. But if you have that strong mentality and an understanding of this is just the way we do things here, this is just us, and we're all in this together, and this is what our students notice, and our families notice, and the teachers notice, and outsiders, they notice these things because we intentionally do them. That's what it means to be intentional so others notice. I was just like, wow, yes, all of it.
COVID's actually a pretty good example of like something that happens out of the ordinary, which is true in schools all the time, where some schools were just prepared for it, and some teachers and some leaders were just prepared, and some others weren't.
Right.
One of my directors, when I was an assistant soup during COVID, I asked him, he wasn't shook by anything. And I was like, why is everybody else's hair is on fire and you're just humming along? And he's like, I've been preparing myself long before this. Like, I've been pouring into myself to be the strongest version of me I can be. This is nothing compared to what I'm ready to face.
What are you thinking?
That would be a good whatever that guy was doing training wise would be, speaking of school culture, if everybody school wide had a chance to go through and do something like that. It just makes me think, because you're right, like stuff happens. We had riots on, like whole gangs come on campus from off campus and it would just go crazy, literally. And if you're not, that's traumatic. That kind of event can be very traumatic, and being prepared, that's interesting.
I think that unity shows that culture also. I mean, COVID is like the max, right? As far as like globally, but to Mitch's thing, I mean, we had the same thing. We had gang fights. We had parents trying to beat up kids, and we had parents trying to fight parents, and we had, just chaos in our community. And so, like, can your staff get through that on the other end and feel stronger through that versus feeling like it's just dissolving? And that's chronic stress essentially. And so you need to be able to lean on other people within that structure to build a bond that's greater than the building itself. And so, Mitch, to your point of like, how do you know? I think what TJ is talking through, and I think there's a lot of different ways to do this as a leader, is like, how are you getting that feedback, and how often are you getting that feedback? And it's similar to what we talked about before about our initiatives and given training, right? Are we doing a one and done and then just hoping for the best as the school year goes on, or do we have touch points with that information as we go throughout the year, and it's in our language and it's in our communication and everything that we do? Well, same concept of getting a pulse of where the culture is too. We have to ask for that, and we have to be open to suggestions. We have to be open for potentially it being something that, hey, you know what? There's something that's going toxic in this grade level. There's something toxic that's going on with the subject matter. There's something toxic outside during dismissal. And as a leader, not being defensive of that, and then finding a common solution that we can fix it, right? And so I think that sometimes is a barrier, is either I'm afraid of what I'm going to get back, so I'm not going to have any feedback provided to me, or two, when the feedback's provided, I'm going to look the other way and not do anything about it because it's part of my own identity, right? You're saying that I'm a bad leader because this is going on, and so I'm going to get defensive about that, or I'm going to look the other way. And in fact, we have to be like, no, I am open to it. I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to your feedback. I'm open to potentially something that's really toxic that's going on that that I need to be responsible to fix.
But that's also a culture thing, right?
That's why
Like
it's so
TJ
important for
said
the
that,
leader.
yeah, bus drivers, for better or worse, felt free to come into my office because I've created a culture of feedback. It's the same thing with teachers in the classroom. If they know, if students know that, one, you have a mechanism for daily feedback already in place, and you're knowing your kids. But I was kind of chuckling inside, thinking like cultures of feedback where I would be working with students, primarily multi-language learners, and it'd be hilarious because the sweetest, usually female students, would come up after class, kind of like passing period or lunch, stop by and be like, "Mr. Weathers, you can't let those boys keep saying what they're saying because it's not nice." And I'm like, I had no clue what they were saying because I'm not fluent enough, and they knew it and just took full advantage. And it was like, you think about they felt safe enough, comfortable enough coming and giving some feedback, that's and not taking it personal. It's the same thing, I think.
Yep, totally.
Okay.
I think a sign on the other side, you asked about signs and kind of went towards the positive, but a sign on the other side is when your best people are quiet, you've got a problem on your hands.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
When they're closing their doors and not saying a word. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when they're not
But you
telling
also have
you,
to have avenues for participation, right? It's easy. We're all tired, overworked, even your best teachers, but those pathways for participation. I remember clearly when I first got hired, again, where I spent most of my career, and there was, right from the jump, there were teachers presenting at the staff meetings. Principal kicked it off and we do our things, but they were like reviewing data that, here's what's going on in the math department, showing it and talking about it. It was like, oh, that's engaging for teachers, right? The culture, you could just, because there was avenues for participation, it's like it would be harder for them to be quiet. But let's say your best teachers are being quiet. What do you do as a leader?
It's time to build the systems with the surveys and then the one-to-ones and the avenues, like you said, for them to participate again. But I would be soliciting, if you're not regularly getting feedback from people who feel open and free to tell you about yourself and the school, then it's time to open those doors back up. Go knock on the door of your best teacher and sit down in their classroom, ask for some time with them. Because the minute your best person's unwilling to come to you and say, we've got a problem here, you're either perfect or nobody's telling you about the problems. And I'm going to go on a limb and say there's no perfect school.
No. And Mitch, too, I would say that most often those folks are feeling overwhelmed because as an admin, and I know I've been guilty of this in my team, is that we leaned on them too much. If we needed something, we always went to the same people. And so because we knew they did a hell of a job and they were going to do a great, whatever we asked, they were going to say yes, they were going to do a wonderful job, and the output was going to be phenomenal. We knew that. But when you lean on them so much and say, hey, Kim, can you do this? Hey, Kim, can you do this? Hey, Kim, can you do this? Then it's like they were overwhelmed. They were stressed out. They were burnt out. And a lot of times it was just like, I can't take any more on. And they want to succeed, but they don't want to disappoint. And so, they want to come through every single time. And unfortunately, through some feedback that was provided to us, it was like, oh shoot, you know what? There's like 7 people on our campus that are amazing people. And we ask these 7 people every time to take it on. And that's not fair.
That's the 80-20 rule. I used to tell my leadership as department chair, it was the same thing. I think that's human nature, Josh. And I'd remind them, like, teaching's not charity. If you're going to ask this person to do something after hours, take on a certain role, you got to pay them. Find the money to pay them. And if you can't, we'll figure it out. But the teaching's not charity. This is a profession. They need to feel respected and valued and poured into. I think one other thing of culture that is interesting to consider is just like even like signage, the external environment, like the physical outside of the classroom space, the common areas. I think I may have told you all where my kids went to K-8, they were very intentional about, even in the hallway, instead of it saying don't run, it said please walk. So there was all that stuff, little tiny things feed into the culture overall of the school. So I'd love to hear any thoughts on that as a school culture or even a district culture, how that
Amy, you wanna kick
external
it off?
environment influences.
Well, I love a good visual. You know me. I'm all about a good visual. A very intentional one. A very intentional one. And if you are for sure like a PBIS school too, it just is a beautiful thing when you can always flip it to the positive, right? Like the please walk. Walking feet this way with a visual is a beautiful thing across a campus. But also, I think having teachers and administrators and support staff who also say, remember, walking feet, or it's expected to walk, or please walk, instead of no, don't, what are you doing? Come back. We're not running here. Like, you know what I mean? Your language has to match the visuals as well. That is what I'm going to say about that.
That makes sense.
Yep. I think we need to wrap up. Josh.
I think so too. I think that's a great ending point. All right. So our next episode is going to be a mailbag episode. So if you're new to the podcast, this means that you get to send in questions and we're going to answer them. We're going to spend this whole episode just going through those as quickly as possible. I know from the last time we did it, we had a whole doc full of questions. So we want more though, because obviously we're going to continue this practice of doing these mailbags in the future. So we'll do a series of 4 episodes, and then between the series, we'll do a mailbag. And you can ask a question on this episode or something previously discussed. It could be a whole topic. It could be something on a whole series. But we would love for your feedback and your questions so that we can answer those in the future. So with that, is there anything else, Kim, that you want to touch on in regards to our wonderful Vibe EDU event here coming at the end of July?
Yeah, I think just that we're always looking for partners. We're always looking for sponsorships as well. And so if you think that you are a good fit for the work that we all do, right? Definitely reach out to us. We would love to hear your story, your organization, and partner alongside you for sure.
Awesome. Well, I've got the website on the screen here, but it's going to be in the show notes also. It's teachinginsideout.com/vibe-edu. Definitely check that out as far as the information, some of the more, in-depth details about the event. Obviously, the 4 of us will be in person at the event, and it was such an awesome and powerful event last year. I can't wait for us to be together. And now, Kim, we're doing a second day too. So do you want to touch on that in regards to the VIP tickets?
Yeah, if you get a VIP ticket, you not only will get to be with us for the evening portion on July 31st, but you're also invited to be with us for an intimate coaching session, a live podcast taping as well. Beautiful brunch in the gorgeous Hyatt in Huntington Beach, California. So stay tuned for more details. Mm-hmm.
Well, I cannot wait. And of course, if you need support in anything, the 4 of us love for you to reach out through our websites, all those in the show notes, as we know that there's a lot of things coming up here in the spring, and it could be a lot. You could be overwhelmed, you could be stressed, and we want to be here for you. So with that, we will see you again for a wonderful Vibe EDU mailbag, and we'll see you again next week.